Hello and welcome to the Event Industry News podcast. This podcast is kindly sponsored by N200 GES, our smart event solutions partner. For more information on N200 and its smart event solutions, visit n200.com. The podcast episode that you are watching was first broadcast on Tuesday the 11th of April. Unfortunately, due to a slight technical problem with our live stream that evening, the stream itself went out, but the recording of it didn't start until a few minutes in. This podcast episode talks about event ROI, and specifically what we're looking at in this particular episode is whether exhibitors are killing their ROI by capturing leads in the quote-unquote normal way. A company called Captuvate claimed to have taken a very different approach to lead capture, and in doing so identified that companies are killing their ROI because their process hasn't evolved. We were joined by Brian Anderson, the company's co-founder, who joined us from Edinburgh to discuss this particular subject, and we pick up the episode a few minutes in with Brian answering, I suppose, what is the normal way, first of all, in their eyes, of lead capture and how they identify what ROI is. When you actually look at ROI and what it means, return on investment, ultimately what companies are looking to do is seek some sort of return. But is that even achievable? I mean, are we still a bit blinded and a bit misled by the whole notion of ROI? Is it something that, I suppose, if you forgive the bluntness of the question, is a real thing? Because there's a lot of people in the industry who have argued even recently that ROI is actually something that maybe is not worth even focusing on, because depending on the nature of your business, it's so difficult to measure.
Yeah,
especially when you factor in marketing people who would talk about something like brand exposure.
Yeah, well, that's exactly what I was going to mention there. You know, at your colleague Adam's event tech talk a few weeks ago, there was a question by a member of the audience, I believe, who wanted to understand whether they could get or whether they could calculate a return on investment when the types of events that they were running were educational events for their colleagues. Now, you know, that's not my line of business, and I can't think of easy ways that they can calculate that. However, where I work is the return on investment is clearer because it's revenue or it's qualified sales opportunities, and so it's much clearer what you're getting back. Now, you can understand what you're investing. You know, you're calculating your costs and the amount of time and resources it takes for your team to work an event and to follow up. And as I've just mentioned, in our line of work, you can calculate what you get back. But one part of your question there was about, you know, taking the time to really work it out, and the question is so deep that ultimately you get to a stage where you should probably try and calculate it to a certain extent, but probably not kill yourself trying to do so. Like, if you can work out as a business that, you know, you're maybe influencing sales opportunities at these events, and you're not killing yourself, and your money isn't going down the drain, then perhaps that's good enough for you. You know, there are huge companies out there who have lots and lots of resources to spend calculating whether they get return on investment, and even they can't do it, because the larger they are, the more complex their sales cycles are. You know, how do you know whether one touch point you had with a potential customer really influenced an opportunity that was going to close way down the line with a colleague who works in a different office? You know, so there's so many rabbit holes with that question that you could keep going and ultimately never get to the bottom of it. However, for me, that's not an excuse to, you know, not approach it at all. There are ways. Glitter, for example, they released a spreadsheet just a few weeks ago that makes it easy to get some idea on whether your events are providing a return. And if you're not taking, you know, basic steps to get a rough idea, then arguably, you know, that's the first step.
That's interesting, because you'll forgive me for sort of coming in with any sort of pre-loaded ideas about what we may be talking about this evening, and looking at what your company does, and particularly looking at the idea for this topic and what we spoke about in advance. But I very much felt that you would be really sort of pushing that ROI is vitally important for everybody. But interestingly, you do seem to be taking this angle that actually it's horses for courses in some respects. It's not going to be right for everybody, but for the people that it is right for, the processes and that slightly different way of doing things that you've identified could actually help you.
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone should attempt to work out whether they are getting a return on investment on all of their marketing channels. You know, by just not doing that, I don't know anyone who doesn't make the most basic attempts to work it out.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's tools now to make it much easier to do. My point was more, don't exhaust yourself trying to do it. Sorry, don't exhaust yourself trying to take it as far as you can, because ultimately it's very, very difficult to get a 100% cast iron view of, is everything you're investing into this marketing channel, be it events or anything else, you know, is that returning more than what you're spending, or is it returning 3x, 4x? I mean, if you take something like email marketing, for example, you know, that's regularly seen as being one of the highest ROI marketing activities. And however, like if your email subscribers were to first get on your list because they met you at an event, well, does that mean that your events cost also goes into your email marketing cost? Or if they clicked on your email and then bought something from your website, can you directly attribute it to that click? Or is it perhaps, I don't know, maybe the Kardashians also tweeted about you that day? There's just so many rabbit holes that you can go down. And so I think that absolutely everyone should attempt to look into it. But, you know, for every hour that you spend trying to calculate your ROI, you should probably be spending 3 or 4 hours trying to improve your ROI next time. So just use it as a benchmark, and then the next time you go to an event or the next time you run a marketing campaign, look at your own internal metrics and try and better them. And that's time that's probably well better spent than, you know, looking for that extra little bit of granularity from your ROI calculation.
So this, but sounds things, and forgive me if I'm wrong in how I've interpreted it. This is a case of not getting bogged down too much in what ROI is and how to identify it and the metrics and all the rest of it, blah, 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 but actually looking at the processes that you use to try and identify it and changing the processes rather than change how you analyze ROI.
Yeah, I think if you can come to a company-wide decision on how you're going to attempt to calculate that and agree that, you know, that's going to be the basis for your benchmark. If you're a more junior level marketer and you need to speak with your CMO or your directors to do that, just everyone agree how you're going to calculate ROI, and then, you know, go through the process of calculating it for every event or every marketing campaign, but almost put that process to bed for the year and just focus on getting those results and then spending time trying to better them, because that's ultimately what matters, is improving your performance as opposed to, you know, really drilling down and measuring it.
So we've got a few people who I've noticed have joined us after tonight's podcast has started, Brian. So I suppose just to bring them up to speed for anybody just tuning into tonight's episode, is we're talking to Brian Anderson from Captuvate. We're talking about the subject of ROI and whether or not the process and the historic process of lead capture at something like an exhibition actually leads to killing their ROI. And what we've done so far is we've asked a question, I suppose, what is it? And identified, you know, is it a bit of a, what's the correct phrase for this one, Brian? Something that's a little bit misleading ROI, and are people getting too bogged down in it, I suppose, is one way of looking at it. By improving the process of capturing the leads at the first instance and dealing with those in a better way? Are we giving people at least a fighting chance of analyse what it may be? I'm curious to go back to the point that you were making, that you touched on, Brian, that there are now so many variables involved when you're trying to analyse ROI. It's not just the investment of somebody would make paying for an exhibition stand. So let's say, for example, the cost of the stand itself is £5,000. We all know that then on top of that, if you're going to do 3 days at somewhere like the NEC, you will have hotel costs involved in that. You will have staffing costs involved in that. You'll have the fact that your sales staff are on a stand there rather than doing their day-to-day sales activities, and you then have the cost of the sales staff following up all of those leads outside of their day-to-day prospects and things that they're working on that weren't generated from the exhibition. So with it becoming such a minefield, let's bring it back to the process that you guys have developed and how it differs from the traditional process, and what you're trying to do differently and what you're trying to impart process-wise on your clients.
Well, you know, the process of calculating ROI is always going to sit with the client. You know, we're just a supplier, and so we can only, I guess we can advise them, but they generally already have their own, you know, their own processes for calculating ROI. You know, we work with sophisticated clients, and they know how much these events cost, and they also know what goes into those costs. You've mentioned some of the things there. And so we're not necessarily trying to change the way that they calculate ROI. We're a lot of what you're talking about is referencing a blog post that we'd written, and we're essentially trying to let them see that just going through the motions and capturing leads the way that they've always done is actually detrimental to the ROI that they will get. Not necessarily how they calculate it, but it's detrimental to the ROI they will get because there's holes in that process. So, you know, if you capture 400 leads at an event and you're not going to speak to any of them, or you're not going to attempt to speak to any of them until 3 or 4 days after the event, then when you think about it, if you're speaking with a high-level prospect and they're walking the event floor for 5, 6, 7 hours over 3 days, then they're probably going to be contacted by 20, 30, 40 vendors, and they're not going to remember you. They're not. You can have the best follow-up email, but they're going to struggle to remember you because they're back in the office and they've got 400 emails because they've been off emails for a couple of days. And so rather than trying to change how our clients calculate ROI, we're just trying to get them to see that these default processes that a lot of companies use to capture leads aren't doing them any favors, because it's the same as what everyone else is doing, and by just blindly following those processes, they're actually hindering the ROI they do receive, as opposed to changing the way they calculate it.
The beauty about this, about doing this live stream tonight, Brian, is that the people who are tuning in at the moment are able to submit their questions. We've actually got a question that's come in just whilst you've been talking about the last little subject. And I'm going to fire it at you here and see what you make of it. So if we take a typical exhibitor, which typical job profile would in reality use ROI percentage as a determining success metric anyway? So I guess, you know, if you've got a big exhibition stand or booth that's manned by a lot of different salespeople, are any of them really bothered about ROI? Which person within a company and what sort of job title or job position or job profile would use that metric?
Sure. So I can only speak from my experience, and so we're speaking with a lot of demand generation marketers, and these are people who, if you look at their profiles on LinkedIn, they maybe not even mention events, but these are people who really are in charge of generating demand for their companies. And because they have fingers in a lot of pies across online and offline channels, they really know which channels are working best when it comes to generating a return on their investment. So demand generation marketers are a good one. Field marketing managers in my line of work are also a good one. We've actually found that the event marketing managers are, certainly the ones that we've spoken to are so busy with the day-to-day logistics of setting up, organizing, and reviewing events that they often take a lead from maybe a marketing director when it comes to generating calculating return on investment. And so the event marketing managers themselves, I mean, there's been a few who are really interested in the business results of, you know, what happens once their leads are transported back to HQ. But a lot of the event marketing managers themselves are or certainly the ones we've spoken to, are just so caught up in the day-to-day running of it that they'll only look at return on investment maybe every 3 or 4 months, you know, when they're back in the office and they've got a prolonged period of time to look into that.
I'm going to find the right way to phrase, I suppose, this next question, but if processes improve throughout and we find better ways to capture leads, identify which ones are the strong ones, which ones are the weaker ones, and we follow them up as efficiently as we possibly can, is there a scenario where one day we can abandon even having to contemplate and look at ROI? Because we'll deal with the leads in such an efficient way that we know instinctively that show's been a success.
Personally, I don't think you'll ever be able to abandon that. You know, I mentioned the demand generation marketers before, and I mentioned how they're in charge of this whole range of tactics that companies can use to drive demand for their products. And so the people I'm speaking to are interested in events because events consume quite a large portion of their budget, but they're also doing SEO, Facebook marketing, LinkedIn marketing, you know, any number of other tactics. And so even if we were to optimize our event strategy and our lead generation strategy at events until, you know, we're absolutely delighted with it, then events as a channel still has to compete with all the other channels that are available to a marketing director. And if efficiency in those other channels is increasing, you know, even more exponentially than we're seeing our events efficiency increasing, then arguably events could still be in danger, because a dollar of investment spent on LinkedIn or a dollar of investment spent on Google AdWords or what have you might generate more return, and then events, you know, wouldn't be a worthwhile part of their marketing mix.
We're talking on tonight's podcast to Brian Anderson from Captuvate. Tonight's podcast kindly sponsored by N200 GES, our smart event solution partner. Visit n200.com for more information. And don't forget that you can tweet us questions via @eventnewsblog using the hashtag EINpodcast if you've got any questions or thoughts, indeed, and opinions on tonight's episode of the Event News podcast with Brian. I suppose you've been very gracious so far, Brian, I should point out, in answering some of the questions and really sort of keeping things very, very neutral. But what we should do is allow you perhaps the opportunity to just look at Captuvate and exactly what it is, what your solution is, and what the system is, and how that's actually implemented by somebody who would be utilizing this at a live event. Let's just have a look at this very briefly, and perhaps that will also put into context some of the stuff that you've been saying tonight and where your experience falls from.
Okay, sure, yeah.
Tell us about it.
Well, you know, I think one of the ways that I've been thinking about, so we've been talking about the default way of capturing leads, and that works for, you know, certain types of companies. So we've been speaking with companies who sell, maybe sell's not the right word, but we've been speaking with software companies, and they go to exhibitions and they want to speak to software developers and teach them about using their software. But at the end of the day, there's not a sales process there. What they want those software developers to do is go back from the event, go to their website, download the software for free, and start using it. And so your traditional lead capture process probably isn't going to work there. Your salespeople aren't going to contact these people because there's nothing to sell. And so a traditional lead capture process isn't going to work for those guys, and our lead capture tool isn't going to work for those guys either, because that is a lead generation process that is right for their business. Something I know that a lot of your viewers will be familiar with Pokin. It's a lead generation system where you just you scan your badge, it's all automated, the prospect is sent content, they can consume that content, it's very hands-off, but it works at scale. And for a software company who are only looking to get developers interested in using their software, they're not going to invest sales manpower and helping push that along. Something like that would work for them. Now, where our system comes in is the opposite end of the spectrum. If you have sales opportunities that you're maybe spending tens of thousands of dollars to get in front of high-level prospects, and a scan of the badge is not really sophisticated enough for you, then that's when you might look at something like Captuvate. So let's say, for example, that maybe you're a B2B marketer and you have a couple of hundred target accounts that you want to get in front of. Mm-hmm. Now, when you engage with one of those prospects at the event, the little line item on the spreadsheet that says that you've checked in at the booth, that's not really worthwhile for you. And where you could use something like Captuvate is if you have a defined list of questions that you need to understand the answers to help your team really sell into this account that you may have been trying to get into for 10, 12 months, then you can capture that data at the booth. It's synced into your Salesforce account. The rest of your account team who've been working with you on cracking that account can all see that in real time. And it's just a way that's we've been saying that's a little bit more sophisticated of a way to crack into big accounts that you might be meeting at a trade show, as opposed to just blindly scanning their badge and then waiting for 4 days after the event to have a sales guy reach out to them without any context about what was discussed at the booth.
What about in the scenario that somebody simply hasn't got time to go through that process? Somebody's walking out the door at 5 to 5, they go past your stand, they think, damn it, that's the one company I wanted to see, and that's exactly the product I want, and they just literally just said, look, scan my badge quickly and send me some information, because what if they don't have time to go through that process? That's where the old-fashioned badge scanners do come into their own, is when you're that busy on the stand or the visitors are that busy that they just want the scan, send me the information.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we're not saying that you would only use our tool. Our tool is a mobile application that you can use at any event. But it's not to say that you should only use that tool. In fact, just yesterday I was speaking with a lady in California who isn't very experienced with regards to doing trade shows, and she asked, should she save money not hiring a badge scanner and use our tool instead? And I told her that probably wasn't the right thing to do, because we are hoping that her booth is going to be busy at the event. And if she's using our tool, as you've alluded to, and it is a little bit more involved of a process to capture that lead, the last thing she wants to do is have her head in our tool scanning or capturing a smaller number of leads when there's loads of people there who just want to be sent content. And so a lot of the companies that we work with have this kind of dual-pronged approach of, for the very best or the most engaged leads, okay, they want to take that little bit of time, they want to maybe capture some in-depth notes and have it go through to Salesforce, but for the rest, just scan their badge. And in a way that's helpful for the sales guys, because they know if someone just had their badge scanned, then they're maybe saying that they weren't ready to speak to sales, and then those leads can be sent through Marketo or HubSpot. You can nurture those leads automatically, because you know that there was a separate process for the leads that were more engaged, that did want to speak to a specific salesperson that has experience in their industry, and for those leads, having a different process is something that they appreciate.
And when you talk about different processes, you alluded earlier to the fact that you were you were at the Event Tech Talks recently that looked at this the subject of ROI, and in actual fact, that Event Tech Talks was called Lead Generation 2.0 and ROI, and lead generation being about empowering anyone that enters your show or event with smart technology to enable them to have a better experience and putting them in control of their own leads, be that exhibitor products, content sessions, etc., etc. Does the stuff that you're doing with Captuvate very much sit in with what people are, calling this lead generation 2.0 in terms of empowering exhibitors?
So we think it empowers exhibitors absolutely, because it gives them options that they perhaps didn't have before. As we've talked about in the past, if the only option 10, 15 years ago for you was to take business cards, then you had to do it. But now there's tools out there that exhibitors can use in addition to the technology that's provided by the organizers. And if that works better for them in certain scenarios, then absolutely they can use it. And marketers are used to doing this now. All their tools that they use on a daily basis that are outside of the event sphere, they're all interconnected. And so if that's what they're used to using, and they want something that they can use at their events, that they can control and take to every event, then they're going to do that. One of the things. Sorry.
No, carry on. It's prompted a question. There's a question come in from one of our listeners, which actually dovetails perfectly in with what you just mentioned there, in talking about systems that are used outside and processes that are used outside an event space. And the question that came in, and I'll paraphrase it because it's quite detailed, is how is a lead generated at an event different or benchmarked against a lead that might be generated in the field or via a digital channel or via an advert? Is it the same? Is it better? Is it cheaper? Is it more expensive? We spend a lot of time looking at ways to identify ROI through leads generated at events, but seemingly companies don't spend that much time looking at where leads are generated elsewhere.
Well, I mean, there's quite a lot to that question, because a lot of companies will argue that when you're meeting with a prospect at an event, some of those meetings will result in leads, and some of those meetings will result in essentially targets or names. If you come by my stand at an exhibition booth and you just want my swag and I scan your badge, then a lot of companies I speak to wouldn't even call that a lead. And so you've got this kind of concept of names on a spreadsheet, and some of those will be leads and some of those will just be bits of data that you throw away and you never look at again. But that's the same across every channel. I'm sure we've all gone to a vendor's website because they want to learn more about a topic. I did it the other day when I wanted to learn more about Salesforce. I signed up for a white paper on the ins and outs of Salesforce campaigns, and this company look at me and think, oh, he's a co-founder of a company, he's a lead. I'm never going to buy that company's offering. It's just not right for me. However, they have fantastic educational content. I'm now in their database. Am I a lead? Am I a target? Am I just an email? There's a whole section around that comes to the fore before you even start to work out what happens further down the sales funnel as they become more qualified.
It's we should once again just give a shout out to the Twitter feed tonight, at Event News Blog. If people want to get involved and throw any opinions or thoughts out there, hop onto Twitter. It'd be interesting to see after tonight's episode and even in the next week or so, the feedback that we see from people who may listen to this after the live broadcast tonight. So yeah, at Event News Blog is the Twitter handle. Use the hashtag EIN podcast to get involved. One other thing that I was curious to ask from your own point of view is, are you targeting this service and what you guys do very much at organisers to feed down into their exhibitors, or are you trying to target this to exhibitors? Because presumably from an efficiency point of view, if you can promote what you guys are doing to organisers and get them to feed that down, that's going to be better for you guys, or are you working on both strands?
At the moment, we're focusing on exhibitors, and there's a good reason for that. Is these are the companies that put up the money. You know, we're speaking with companies that spend millions and millions of dollars every year on events, and so if we can help them optimize that spend, you know, get a better return on their investment, then you know, they'll be very happy with us, and you know, we'll help spread the word. Now, further down the line, is this something that exhibitors could, organisers could use as well? Yes, perhaps. You're right. There's economies of scale of you know, our tool being distributed through the organisers down to the exhibitors. But at the moment, you know, we're just a fledgling company. We feel that if we can provide value to the exhibitors, and you know, see how things go from that angle, then it's something that we may look at in the future. But for the moment, you know, the exhibitors and the event marketers, they're the ones who are putting the money up. They're the ones who want to see the return. That's ultimately what our goal is to try and help them get a better return. And so organisers might help as a distribution channel, but the people we're ultimately trying to help are the exhibitors themselves.
You did mention earlier on that you were speaking to somebody in the USA recently. Have you done much business, and are you talking to a lot of potential clients or existing clients over in the US, or are you predominantly working in the UK?
Believe it or not, we speak to more people in the US than we do in the UK, which is fun for me, being on GMT time. It means I get to do a lot of 9 p.m., 10 p.m. calls. But yeah, a lot of the companies we're speaking with are in the US because I guess just the economies of scale over there. There are way more events for these companies to attend, and so most of the people we've spoken to in the UK have actually come after reaching out to their US counterparts, because a lot of these companies are headquartered over there, and I'd say US lead the charge, and certainly with the companies that we've spoken to, the UK and the European counterparts are more operational. They're the ones who put into practice the strategies that, you know, have been decided over there.
How does it work as a comparison between the US and the UK in your experience when you're talking about this particular subject? Do you find that it's something that the US people as a whole and people who are working in marketing over in the US want to get bogged down in ROI and want to look at it in more detail than people in the UK? Is it quite easy for you to say, yeah, they get it, but they are a little bit more of a struggle?
No, I don't think you can. By and large, I don't think there's a lot of difference between the UK and the US when it comes to that. You know, I mentioned a little bit before, but you can speak with you know, some events people who are just happy to continue doing what they've always done because they feel it's working for them, and you know, we all know that events people are exceptionally busy, and they've got enough on their plate and it's working for them that you know, that's what they want to continue doing. But someone with the same job title in the same city working for a different company, you know, they could always be looking to innovate and look at new techniques and new tactics. So I wouldn't say that there's much difference between the UK and the US. It really depends on maybe the organizational characteristics of where these people are working.
The fulcrum of tonight's podcast is ROI. And on that note, if somebody's looking, or if you approach a potential client of your own about utilizing your service, what that's going to do is essentially add an extra cost to them going to a particular event. So you then become a criteria and a statistic within their ROI. So when you're looking to cost it, how does it work for a company who may be wanting to utilize your service? How would they identify your own cost against what it's going to cost them to go to the show? Is it per lead? Is there a fixed price or a package price that a client would be charged to use your service?
Well, being honest, we're still trying to work that out. You know, we're a software as a service business, and everywhere you look, software as a service businesses are generally offered as a monthly pricing point. And for the companies that we're approaching, you know, a lot of them do, you know, events every month, and so paying for a tool that helps them at every event they go to every month, that works. But the lady I was speaking to that I mentioned before, she does 2 events a year, and so she's not going to sign up for a monthly contract, and so she wants to use our tool to optimize the investment that she's having in this event that she's going to next month, and you know, we'll create a package that works for her there, that means that she won't have to sign up for, you know, a monthly subscription.
And I know it's perhaps not ideal for you to plug anybody else, but is what you're doing with Captuvate a unique offering at the moment, or are other companies and lead capture companies cottoning onto this idea that the whole process does need to be refined and made into a more efficient beast?
There are other companies who offer tools that event marketers can take to every event. You know, there's a lot of industries out there where the organizers, I mean, less so now, but where the organizers maybe don't even provide technology for the exhibitors. If you're going to a smaller event and you're sponsoring that event, then maybe you don't even get like a lead retrieval device. And so there are other tools out there that companies have used to essentially capture data, the equivalent of like a Google form, for example, where they're just typing in information into a form field. That information is synced to somewhere else, and then they can retrieve it at a later date. So there are definitely tools that exhibitors can use outside of the tools that are provided by the organizers to capture leads and engage prospects.
Brian, we should, before we wrap up today's episode, because we are getting towards that time where we need to bring things to a close, unfortunately, but tonight has very much been one of those subjects where we could probably talk for hours and hours, no doubt, and things will keep flowing, and I'm sure it's going to be a subject that we will touch on again, because it's clearly a subject that in the industry as a whole is getting looked at the moment, and there are differences of opinion in how and why and should we and shouldn't we. Before we do start our roundup of tonight's episode, Brian, tell us how people can get in touch with you guys. Give us your website details, and we can get people over there if they want to have a look at it.
Yeah, sure. So the best way to get in contact with us is through the website, and it's captuvate.com, like Captivate, but with a U, which is always fun trying to explain that over the phone. Yeah, captuvate.com. Our website's there. That's the best way to get in contact with us.
Excellent, and we'll tweet some links out as well via @eventnewsblog, so that people can head over and check you out, Brian. Brian Anderson has been our guest this evening. Brian is the co-founder of Captuvate. He's joined us on the line from Edinburgh. Thanks to the people that have tuned into the live stream this evening and submitted the questions. Don't forget that even after the live stream tonight, this episode will be available to watch via eventindustrynews.com, and an audio version will be available to download and listen to via our iTunes podcast channel. So head over there. If you do want to put any questions, thoughts, opinions after this live stream is finished, please do so. It's @eventnewsblog is the Twitter handle. Use the hashtag EIN podcast. On next week's podcast, we're going to be talking to the founders of the Sunfall Festival. This is a new festival in London, and we're going to be having a chat to them to find out a bit more about it, how it's come about, where it's going to be taking place, and see what those guys are up to. Tonight's podcast is sponsored by N200 GES, our smart event solution partner. For more information on N200 and its smart event solutions, please head over and visit n200.com.